Just a quick heads up before we start. On Sandwiched, we talk honestly about life, loss, and caregiving. That means conversations may touch on topics such as death and grief. We invite you to listen with care, and please do step away if you need to. Well, welcome to another episode of Sandwiched. It's my extreme pleasure to welcome Carmen Johnson, who'll be joining us today as a guest. Carmen is definitely living and has lived the sandwich life for a period of time. She currently is a CFAO at ORC. She's a mom, a grandmother, a sibling, a caregiver, and everything else in between. Carmen, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Paul. I appreciate it. It's an honor to be here. I have enjoyed working with Tumbleweed and working with you.
Thank you. We appreciate that. As the team was getting to spend some time with you in the pre-interview planning, something that really stuck out, which I wanted to start out with right away, is tell us about your life as a triple-decker sandwich.
I love that. So one of the questions was really about, the sandwich generation as we're talking about. I said, I feel like I've had it all ends, right? I am now 55 years old this week, Paul.
Happy
And
birthday.
thank you. And I am the oldest living immediate family member. And I went through my breast cancer, my mother's leukemia, and my grandmother's death, and my uncle's death while taking care of my children and my grandchildren. And that was where the triple decker came from. It was like, it's hard enough to be sandwiched. Now, sandwich the multi generations too, right? And we had lots of chaos going on at the same time with the caregiving, as you mentioned, with sick, and then my granddaughter with a custody issue and trying to deal that with that and help the families with that, and new babies being born, the awesomeness of that. But yeah, it's a lot. Life hits you all at once.
Yeah, I would go so far as to say I think you had a few triple deckers in there, it sounds like. But I definitely loved that term and wanted to bring that here to our audience. I think that's beautifully said. Well, there's so much to dig into. So let's first start a little bit with your personal story. And, you shared that you had been diagnosed with breast cancer. And from past conversations, I know it's been lots of ups and downs. So let's start a little bit first with you and what was going on in your world and kind of over what period of time.
Well, thank you. I was all prepared to talk about my grandmother because she's my heart, right? But talking about ourselves can be a little bit different. And my mother passed away of leukemia, and literally the day after she passed, I found a lump in my breast. And that left me with caring for my grandmother, who was 102, and amazing. And that journey of being both a caregiver and needed to be cared for, I think is critically important, and what, really we're here to talk about. And I took that moment in my time to really understand what was important to me that I left for my children. And that's how we became so connected, because I was critically aware of mortality at that point, right? And I did not have a cancer that I thought would end that way, but it did make me think about it a lot. I just experienced my mom's death and my uncle's death, and now I was looking at what it would look like if it was my own. And I spent a whole lot of time organizing what my life and organizing what I thought needed to be happen, and really realizing that the biggest gift I could ever give my family was the gift of being able to mourn me. And that sounds easy, but it's not. When we're left with chaos behind, we're left with having to go through our family's estate and our house and the finances and healthcare and all of the things. We leave our families when we're not planned with all the things, and things are stressful and they have to work through it. And I really understood that that's not what I wanted to leave them. I wanted to leave them a well planned exit,
Yeah.
and really the understanding of the love that I could give them and leave behind was that. So as we've spoke, I spent a lot of time reevaluating who were my beneficiaries. Why were they my beneficiaries? Did I need a will? Did I need a trust? Did I need to retitle some things? Or, gosh, the one everybody forgets? They forget to put a beneficiary on their checking account. What happens on your checking account, right? And the goal was to make sure that nobody would be left in the lurch. So I worked real hard on that.
Yeah. Well, thank you. And definitely, having spent some time talking about your grandmother, excited to talk about the wonderful things and lean into some of the more difficult aspects of that journey. But I wanted to kind of anchor us in, what was also happening in your world. And I think, for very different reasons, I faced my own mortality at a very young age. It's not very common. And I think often, especially I feel like culturally here in the US, many of us are fearful and have a difficult time talking and thinking about death and dying. And, part of kind of my personal mission in life is not to always be talking about death and dying, but to create space to lean into thinking about it so that we can then, I believe it's the best thing we can do, not only as a gift we give to others, but also the gift we give to ourselves. And if we think about these are the things I want to achieve and experience before my time comes, right? It's almost like we can be like, okay, what actions am I taking? What are my goals? What are the things that bring me joy? And so that's really what I try and do. And I know from our experience in knowing each other that you do a wonderful job with that, both for yourself and for others. So thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Well, Grandma, 102. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to interrupt you. Please.
No, you're right. Yes, grandma. And speaking of grandma, I have a new grandbaby this week.
Oh, gosh, it's a big week for you, Carmen. That's amazing. Well, congratulations. This is grandchild number
3.
3. All right. Number 3. Well, congratulations.
Thank you.
Awesome. Well, let's hear a little bit more about your grandmother. Remind me, what's your grandmother's name?
My grandmother is Myra.
Myra.
And Myra was the matriarch of our family. She did so much for our family. And I have always said that I admire her so much. I think I am largely a product of her. I did not grow up in a stable home environment, and my grandmother was there for me in every way. And that taught me what caregiving was really about, right? And what it meant to love and love generously, because we all know that sometimes that's difficult. And she just really believed in us and me. And I have a brother and my brother, and she paved the way for what it looks like. And when she left this world, she also had thought a lot about her planning. And so when she got ill, we had talked about what does it look like to move into assisted living? How does that happen? And she was a product of the Depression era, right? And so when it came that time, it was a financial decision. It was a huge financial decision. She wanted to stay home. She wasn't ready to leave, but the money to stay home isn't always something that people can afford or families can afford, right? And we don't live in the same part of the world. I'm in Charlotte. She was in the Seattle area, and having her move in with me wasn't an option. She wanted to stay home. And quite frankly, I don't know that having your loved ones move in with you is the best option. So we've all looked at situations where we want to care for our family, but we don't have the resources necessary to care for our family. So making those decisions, it can be very difficult. But as you know, I sat down with my grandmother at the end and had very critical conversations about exactly what it was she wanted. And it's a hard conversation, but it also is so freeing to be able to understand exactly their wishes. What is it they want to have happen? And how do they want their funeral to look like? And when you have a health crisis, what decisions are you supposed to make? With my grandmother, she had congestive heart failure. She wasn't close to passing, but she got COVID. And because of COVID, the respiratory issue of dealing with congestive heart failure, it was do we do a respirator or not do a respirator? And we knew exactly what life-saving choices we were to make. And so we didn't do the respirator. Had we could have prolonged life, but at 102, was that the right choice, right?
Yeah.
But I understood that. I knew what the decisions to be made were, and that's critically important.
Yeah. And to your point, I think also you were able to have conversations along the way. So you better understood should something happen, right? I don't think many of us, if any of us, could have anticipated something like the COVID pandemic, right? So I don't think any of us were having that conversation. Now we probably are, but before it, I don't think any of us were. But the kind of what ifs, right? What if something happens, or incapacitation? What would you like your life to look like, right? And modern medical medicine is fantastic in that we can be hooked up to a lot of machines and extend for a long period of time. And what does that do? Like, what does that actually mean? And so I'm grateful that you and your grandmother were able to have those conversations. Unfortunately, some folks, because especially those who veer away from it, don't get that chance, and then they're left like guessing, what should I do?
That is exactly right. I stepping into this understanding that I was going to be her caregiver, I did two things that I think were very meaningful that I would recommend to the entire world. I read a book called Being Mortal, and Being Mortal really helped me set my mindset and my frame of mind around asking those important questions and how to ask those important questions. And then the other was at one point, my grandmother was having trouble with decisions around the home, such as, it's no longer safe. We need handicap access and, bars and all the things. And I was really pushing. It was time to go into a assisted living, and she was pushing it. She could still live at home alone. And we brought in a geriatric counselor to sit down and talk with us together and really walk through the pros, the cons, the whys, and advocate for her, but in a safe and healthy way that she could cross her thought processes differently from a mental health awareness perspective. And I just thought that was amazing to have those conversations, because we don't, right? We don't. We choose not to face the inevitable, and we all know it's coming. The
Yeah.
question is how and when,
How and
but
when?
we choose not to face it.
Yeah. Two things I wanted to circle back on. One is, and I want to call out that this is a book you recommended to me years ago, on Being Mortal. Unbelievable. I mean, to your point, please, any of our listeners, listen to it on audio tape, read it. I actually did both because I take things away differently in each kind of modality. It's fantastic. And even if you don't have anybody in your life today that you're caregiving for, I took a lot of tools away, even for my own mortality and the life I want to live and what that looks like. So absolutely a super recommend. It's so good. And there's no support coming from the author, but sincerely, it's just a fantastic book. We definitely recommend it. So I agree with you on that. The second thing you shared that I wanted to dig in a little bit more, because I imagine a lot of folks don't even know how or where. You talked about connecting with a geriatric counselor, I believe was the term you used. Can you tell us, how did you find this person? Where did that come about?
Well, I did a lot of Google searching because I did know that this existed, but I didn't know how to find it, right? And different people or different areas of the country, they may be named differently.
Yeah.
We are getting better about calling it elder care now, but elder care is not the same thing, right? I did a lot of digging. I did finally find a couple of people, and there is a resource online that geriatric counselors are connected to. So I wish I remembered that right now, because I would throw it out there. And I did finally find a resource that had multiple people listed throughout the country, which was really nice.
Awesome. Yeah. Yeah. We had another conversation with a guest as well who had a different but similar situation. It was called a little bit different. So there's, to your point, I think it is that, what are the right keywords to find the right resources? And so if you don't mind, maybe after this, you can send back that link and we can put it in when we put this episode live in the world, and we can add it into the show notes. So that would be fantastic.
I would love that. I think that's fantastic. Talking about being mortal, if I could go back just a second,
Yeah.
I want to point out the thing that I think I learned the most out of that book that helped me the most with my grandmother. I realized that she had a very meaningful life, and that was important to her. And I changed all of my questions in the future to around what did she want to accomplish in her last days that were here. And it really refocused how I dealt with the whole idea of this being close to the end. And one of the things she said at the time was she was expecting her great grandbaby, great great grandbaby.
Yeah.
And she said she wanted to knit a blanket, which
Mm.
was huge, but she didn't have enough energy anymore to knit that blanket. So we literally had a conversation about where she could trade energy. So, Grandma, if you allow somebody to help you take a shower, that saves energy. So then you can do your blanket. If you choose not to walk to the dining room in the morning and you eat breakfast in your room, you can work on that blanket. So, we talked about how we could trade things to accomplish our goals. And that was so meaningful, Paul. It was so meaningful to me to help her accomplish her goals. It was so meaningful for her to be able to accomplish her goals and think about it differently. I felt that book gave me that idea, and it was fantastic. And let me tell you, on the way to the hospital, when she was checked in, she said to me, her last meaningful words to me were, I can't go yet. Tomorrow I have an appointment at the senior center, and they're going to teach me how to put the pom pom on the hat to match the blanket because I finished the blanket.
Oh, so she
That
accomplished her
baby
goal.
got the blanket and the hat.
Oh, that's amazing. And
It was awesome.
I love that you centered in on that story, and I feel so much more connected to your grandmother, as well as, having navigated with my grandparents as well, especially with kind of aging, dying, and death, and then a couple of friends who had terminal disease, right? So they left a little bit early than probably anticipated. I remember some of those conversations, and I think that language of, there are some things that are coming ahead, even if you don't know the time, but what do you want to accomplish between now and then? That reframe is so different because I've seen working in healthcare, also my own experiences where you can see they're struggling with something, right? Activities of daily living, bathing becomes very exhaustive as we're aging. And I think it's what are the things that are most important to you to achieve and accomplish? Right. And then I think just that saying like, hey, by saving energy here and having assistance, that gives you more energy over here versus just you need someone to help you. Right. That just the way you approach that is so different. And I'm not saying it was easy, but I imagine that the outcome probably looked very different because of that.
The outcome was incredibly different because when I first started approaching the idea of assisted living, it was she no longer could live at home,
Yeah.
right? You can't live at home. You need help with your laundry. Gosh forbid, do not walk down those stairs again,
Yeah.
right? And it was very much a I'm worried about you approach.
Yeah.
And when I learned to reframe the approach, we became closer too,
Yeah.
because it no longer felt like I was treating her like a toddler, right?
Yeah.
Because unfortunately, we know how this works. We all get to that state where we need extra help. And I did at times feel like I was dealing with a toddler.
Yeah, I can say there are definitely moments where the kind of role transformation and role reversal a little bit is a pretty common occurrence in my own experience as well as with others that I've spoken to, kind of that they become more of a toddler, of a child, of a teenager, right? And you're shifting in more of the kind of parental responsible party, and that's a dynamic shift for most people. Something else that you had shared before that I wanted to have you share with our audience is tell us about your family motto.
My family motto, I'm like, what did I share? Because I share so many things, right?
Do you want me to what we captured, and maybe you can lean in and say, oh, this is not how I meant it?
Well, what did you capture there as my family motto? Because I'm an all in all the time kind of person, right?
Yep. Take care of your own.
Take care of your own. Yeah. So I do that, right?
Oh yeah.
So taking care of my own is the family we choose also. I think it's so important that we live as community. And I have been taking care of my own in big ways, in little ways. I had my children stay at home till they were older because they started their own businesses. They were saving their money so that they could buy their first house. Whatever it was, I've always felt very strongly about we need to show up and take care of our own. But it has become very difficult in the generation that we live in today because we're all over the place now, right? Families are rarely in the same place anymore. And because of that, and extended families are now all over the country, they're not living in your backyard. I'm fortunate enough that mine all do live close to each other, but that wasn't the case with my mother and my grandmother. And we were trying to care for somebody that is thousands of miles away. How do you do that? It used to be that we had farm type communities and everybody stayed home, and it was easier, not saying it was easy because it's not easy, but it was easier to care for those multi-generational homes. But today that feels impossible. And today we have different types of needs than we did a
Yeah.
hundred years ago as well.
Yeah. Yeah, and to your point, so I have family all over. I'm currently based in the Midwest in Iowa. I don't have any family nearby. And I think that's quite common for a lot of folks. And so I think that the caregiving kind of lens looks a little bit different. And also too, I do feel like there's almost a little bit of a shift that I'm seeing of more common for folks to, like your children did, stay at home a little bit longer, to save, to build business, to put money for a down payment, all of those things. And I think the multi-generational living is becoming increasingly more common in a lot of places, probably not everywhere, but having spent over 20 years in California where it's very expensive, right? There's lots of places that are more expensive than others. It's kind of a necessity for a lot of folks. And there are pros and cons to it, right? I mean, I'll speak for myself. For me as a teenager, kind of the individualization was so important, right? And being on my own was really like the goal. And
Mhm.
it was not easy, right? It's not easy for a lot of folks. And so I think that to your point, it's great that people are able to do that. And I think that as we are looking at our aging population who are, in general, living longer in the US, sadly, not necessarily living healthier longer, right? There's a lot more need for additional support, right? Whether it's dementia, Alzheimer's, or other forms of diagnosis like COPD or something of that nature. So they need more support. So I think that people are going to continue to evolve and reframe what that looks like and finding how do we show up together more. So I love that. I wanted to share, and this is really just I loved the way it came through as you were talking about taking care of your own. I know you've lived all over the US from previous conversations. Your accent really came out when you're talking about your family, and it was in the best, most beautiful way. So I don't call it out to make it feel awkward, but I really felt the warmth as that tone was coming through. So I just wanted to share that with you.
I would like to know what accent you think that is, since I've lived all over the United States.
Well, I mean, I will say I mean, I'm not sure, to be honest, but I love that it came through. It felt a little bit, I felt like it was a little bit of Southern undertone, maybe a little bit of twang, right? But it was really just kind of a tone of family and connectedness. And there was a subtle softness as you were speaking about it that really I could feel in that moment.
As you know, I am very proud of my family, and I have four children and three grandchildren, and they are all just super special to me. I think they're doing amazing things in the world. I can't wait to see what they all do as they grow up. I have two in college and two that have families, and it's just awesome. It's awesome to be around them. It's awesome to watch them grow. And this is the best part of life, right? But it won't be long, and they will be sitting in my shoes wondering what to do with me. And I hope that I leave them in a place that they don't have to wonder.
Yeah. Well, what a perfect segue, because my next question for you was, I remember a mention of a what to do if I die folder.
Yes, I literally, during cancer, created a folder on my computer that's called What to Do If I Die. And I created that for my children because I was going through cancer, didn't think I was going to die, but God forbid something happened, and I didn't want it to be difficult. I have all of my copies of beneficiaries in there, logins for accounts, wills and trusts, and anything you might want to know. And it was important to me that they were not having to look for it, that it was obvious that it was here. And I mean, it's literally everything you could think of that I wanted them to know, including things that were theirs, copies of their social security cards, their report cards when they were kids, their titles for their cars, the things that moms keep, right?
Yep.
That they needed to know either where it was and where to find it, or they needed a copy of it for their own records. So some of my file, one of my files is literally, these are the things I want you to know and where you can find them, which is fantastic. And this is the beauty of Tumbleweed, because this is what you're creating. It is the product for the person that's not like me, that's not planned and not putting it all together, to be able to be asked those questions. So back to my grandmother, I said, what is it you want to accomplish in this world, right? Having the question asked of you in a way that allows you to think through it, but not taxingly. They're presented in a very simplistic way, which is the beauty of the software, really
Yeah.
helping you think it through.
Thank you. And, as someone who was helping us build our, kind of at Tumbleweed, our first MVP, right? You were very engaged early on, and a lot of your lived experience and insight were super helpful. And from my own experience, it was, your grandmother, it sounded like, did a lot of pre-planning. I'm sure there were gaps, of course. I did not have quite the same experience in most of my situations. So that was really kind of the pain point. And that's the goal that Tumbleweed is trying to help folks navigate and solve for. And so, if you want to learn more about Tumbleweed and the work that Tumbleweed is doing, go to tumbleweedplan.com. Tumbleweed Plan is actually the one who supports this podcast here at Sandwich. So check out more there. So thank you for that. This episode of Sandwich was brought to you by Tumbleweed. Tumbleweed is an AI-powered platform that helps families organize important records, capture life stories and wishes, and navigate the complexities of caregiving, aging, and legacy planning with compassion. We appreciate their support. Learn more at tumbleweedplan.com. I wanted to lean into a little bit about for you and what you want to accomplish, and talk to us about that. And what are some of the things that, I know for your grandmother, for example, she was a huge advocate of NAMI. That really is something I remember. And, I remember, a beautiful gift after her passing. And I imagine for yourself, those are things that you've been contemplating as well.
Yeah, thank you for asking. You are absolutely correct. I grew up in a very dysfunctional home, and I have always had a passion for young teen mothers or young adult mothers, and always thought that I would find something in that area when I retire to really get back to. My grandmother sat on the boards for National Alliance for Mental Ill for a long time. And I mean, long time, like 30 years. And she was passionate about it. My uncle was paranoid schizophrenic, and she believed there would be a cure, and she lived and breathed everything about that. And now, having my own crisis as an adult and going through breast cancer, I admittingly will say this, and it's kind of tough to say at times. What I learned in breast cancer is how incredibly privileged my life is.
Mm.
And that was really hard for me when I was looking at young mothers who were having trouble keeping their jobs, having trouble paying their rent, having trouble taking care of their children, didn't have the caregivers they needed, maybe the spouse they needed, or the family dynamics that really pulled everybody together. And as you said, I'm all in on my family and what people need and how we help them. And I watched that around me, and it broke my heart. It broke my heart in ways I can't explain, because it wasn't my journey, but it was watching around me the crisis of especially young mothers,
Yeah.
especially young mothers. Breast cancer is, as most people know, it hits 1 in 8 women. It's already traumatic. But what we're finding now is, it's recommended your first mammograms at 40, but we're finding more and more instances before 40. The number of women I can tell you that were diagnosed because they were pregnant with their first child,
Wow.
it's just alarming. And that group of young women that are going through this, it's my heart just goes out to it. So, as you know, I have been involved with a book recently. I Rise Above is a foundation out of the DC area that's very active with young mothers that are going through breast cancer, and they have metastatic breast cancer, which means this is terminal. The question would be, how long would it be terminal? It's metastasized throughout the body to other places. They're living a life that they're fighting now.
Yeah.
And I have been very fortunate to team up with them. And October, Breast Cancer Awareness Month, the 23rd will be our book release of an anthology of all these women's stories. And their stories of how they're surviving and thriving and how they're able to put all the goodness into what their futures look like, how they can be better mothers, stronger wives, all, I mean, just amazing stories. So I'm really looking forward to the release of the book and being able to tell you more.
Yeah, that's really exciting. And I want to really, show gratitude and appreciation for your own acknowledgments of, kind of the privileges that you've experienced. I think that, and I have as well. There's so many challenges I've been through, and I've thought a lot of privilege and a lot of beautiful, wonderful experiences throughout my life. And I try and always take stock of that and, feel gratitude for those things. And I think sometimes it's hard to do that, especially when we're dealing with our own difficulties. So I just wanted to, show appreciation for that, because that can be hard sometimes. I feel like sometimes it can be a little uncomfortable, and our willingness to step in and say, like, oh, wow, if I look at kind of others' experiences, it's not that mine hasn't been difficult. It's just mine's been a little different.
I tell people, and I will continue to tell people, I live an amazingly blessed life. I am grateful for that. I'm incredibly grateful for that. And like most of us, I've experienced my own trauma and my own tragedies, and they've only made me feel more blessed about the life that I've been given. They're they're tough, right? It's
Yep.
tough.
Yep.
And I couldn't be more grateful.
Yeah. Same here. And as you were sharing a little bit about kind of your grandmother's story and her work with NAMI, and you shared earlier in the podcast a little bit about your mom. We both had young moms, which I think influenced both of our lived experience. My mom lives with mental illness, and she's been in and out of institutions most of my life, more, 3/4 of my life at this point. And as the oldest child, and my mom has been married and divorced, right? And so in most situations, she was divorced. And so I was stepped into the caregiver parental role very, very early. And, I reflect on that. And also too, some of the gifts that I got with having such young parents is I've known my great grandparents. One I got to know a little bit closer than others, but not a lot of people experience that. And then a deep, deep connection with grandparents on both sides, right? Because I got to have lots of time with them, especially when, when your parents are teenagers and early 20s, they still are trying to go out and have fun, right? So you spend a little more time with grandparents. So I'm grateful for that and that experience. And it also has taught me some different things, right? About, joy and life and what all that there is to be out there. So yeah, thank you.
It's the greatest gift grandparents are. It's so lucky to have had mine. And I hope that my children will, or grandchildren, say the exact same thing when they're sitting here, right?
I have no doubt. From what I know about you, I have no doubt. But hey, when Sandwich is around, 25 years from now, we'll come back and be like, all right. And it probably won't be me, right? It'll be the next generation. What do they think? So, as this leads on. Would you mind sharing with us, obviously I hear a lot of gratitude and a lot of grace as well. How has that shaped your recovery journey that you navigated personally? And then also too, how does that help you navigate a life now of you're a caregiver, and that will probably continue in some capacity with some ups and downs from here until the next stage?
Again, I'm so incredibly grateful. I am grateful to my husband for putting up with me and putting up with my bad attitudes and him being there when I needed a caregiver. But to your point, it creates a lot more grace in how we show up and how we see others. I really, when people have bad days, I will sit back more today than before this experience and say, okay, what drives that behavior? Why are they in that space? How can I help with that space? Is there something I can do that would alleviate a burden to allow somebody to show up in a different way, right? So I'm much more conscious of that than I ever was before. And that does come out of my gratitude because I understand also the grace that people gave me. I was fortunate enough to work for an amazing, amazing woman. When I was diagnosed, I was working not completely full time, working very much flex time when I felt good and what I could. And she was very supportive through all of it. I was also fortunate enough that when I got sick, this was the time of COVID. I was working at home, right? So I didn't have to show up in an office. I didn't have to wash my hair. I didn't have to do things that took more energy. I talked about energy with my grandmother. I'm very conscious about energy today. That's a learned behavior. I understand what sucks my energy and what gives me energy, and I make choices around what I'm willing to do or not do based on that energy load. Um, that was not something could have said prior to this. We knew when we showed up at work something was going to exhaust us, right? But
Yeah.
you did it. And I make choices to tap out of things that is not where my energy is best spent. But because of that, I'm as productive as I've ever been because I don't take on the things that I can't produce at, right? Um, I do a lot, as you know. I sit on the board for Carolina Breast Friends, which I love. I'm doing a lot of work with the Anthology Project. It's not a lot of work, but I'm supporting that. I'm supporting some stuff with Go Gen Go, which is another wonderful reference. They support financially women that are having trouble with their cancer diagnosis, can't pay rent, things of that nature. So I do some work with them. I do some work with you, which
Yeah.
I love as well. So, as you know, I stay very busy in things that I feel I can give back with,
Yeah.
that I can not just give back, but they fulfill me,
Yeah.
that I know that it's meaningful work. Um, that I think that's where my gratitude shows through to answer the question is in the work that I do.
Yeah. Well, and as someone who gets to sit on the other side of your generosity and giving of, experience and knowledge and sometimes a shoulder to cry on metaphorically, right? Or not so metaphorically. It really is extremely impactful. And, it's something that even myself, right, as a CEO and founder of a startup, I have learned, and I'm learning every day, I have to be really balanced where I spend my energy and where my effort is most important, right? And entrusting the team that is there to, help us achieve our goals and our, outcomes that we're focused on. And so I think that that's something I continuously try to do better in. And some days I'm better than others, right? Like with anything.
Oh, like with anything, it's not a contest, right? Um, I always say that it's a learning, it's a learning curve. Some days we do better than other days. Some days things trigger us differently than other days. Some people's tone triggers us different than other people's tone, right? All we can do is learn from that and show up better the next time.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned earlier in our conversation that you are now the eldest of your generation. What fears, reflections, moving into now, I would define you, it sounds like, as a matriarch of your family. What does that look like for you?
When my grandmother when I was realizing that she was at her end of time, I didn't know that if that was a month or if that was a year, but I knew that we were quickly approaching what that looked like. I personally had a lot of anxiety about it.
Mm.
I realized this was it. I'd already lost my mom and her brother. I'd lost my grandfather, and my grandmother was next, right? And a lot of anxiety went along with that. It's kind of the feeling of being orphaned.
Yeah.
It's who's your people? Who do you rely on? When you have something and need something, where do you go, right? I did have a lot of anxiety about it. I won't say that there aren't days that I just really miss my grandmother tremendously.
Yeah.
Today is her birthday. We planned this on her
Yeah.
birthday on purpose.
Yeah.
I thought, what a way to honor her. I felt this would be a fantastic way to really honor her beyond her being here. And so I would say that all of that has made me who I am. And I've learned from her as the matriarch, and it is a part of me that I really, really honor and cherish. And I have family.
Yeah.
I have created my own family, my own best friends, the people that will be there forever. That, when we're old and gray, it's there already, but we might have the tiny homes sitting exactly, we might have the tiny homes sitting next door to each other, but I'm not alone. And I think I had to really come to that understanding of I have created a network and tribe of people and friends around me that are family.
Yeah.
They are the family that is still there. And the ones that you can call up at any time. That doesn't mean I do, but I know who they are.
Yeah.
If crap happened, I know who I want in my foxhole, right? And I think that's incredibly important to know.
Yeah. Happy birthday. I remember that was why we coordinated today. And how old would she have been today?
105.
Wow. Wow.
And my birthday, 55, 50 years older than me.
Oh, wow.
So very, also, I think that's pretty cool.
Yeah,
And,
for sure.
I've had I had almost 50 years with her.
That's amazing. As we think about our own mortality, right? I think you and I are a little more comfortable than other folks. What are some of the components of your legacy and your family's legacy that you hope future generations will carry forward?
I've thought about this. So this is a great question because I've thought about this when I went through cancer. I really back to not just being planned, but what do you want to be known for? What
Mm,
what do you want to leave behind? Who what do you want people to say about you when you're
yeah.
gone, right? And how do you show up as who you want to be? Even more importantly. So I have thought about that. And I think my legacy, I want to be known as the coach and the mentor, that I always want to leave the world in a better place than when I arrived. I am naturally a person that will always help out, right? Whatever the help out means. But people come to me when they have questions, silly questions, who would you go to for insurance, to big questions.
Yep.
But I want to be known as that person that always arrives, that's willing to help, that'll put in the other hand and raise their hand. But at the same time, I don't want to overcommit and not be able to show up. So I think that's also extremely important. Um, so the legacy for me in showing up comes up in many different ways. It's who my kids become. It's how I volunteer. It's how I donate money. Where do
Yeah.
we choose to leave a legacy behind us? Um, all of those things are critically important to the whole.
Yeah. Beautifully said. And I it's someone who also thinks about my own legacy, right? I think that what I absolutely agree with and am continuously focusing myself on is kind of the what do I want to be remembered for? And I think that even from a legacy perspective, I think about like I leave a legacy kind of day to day, right? Interactions that I have with with our customers, with our partners, right? Those leave imprints on the greater legacy, right? And I think that it's so important to learn to find, it's kind of a silly word, but to find the balance between saying yes and saying no, right? Because we can't be all things to all people, and we can't be the best at everything, right? So it's finding kind of those pieces that are most important. Doesn't mean we can say no to everything, right? That's not the way things work, but being able to really lean into the pieces that bring you joy and also are a way of giving back and building your legacy.
I think the spaces that you can shine at
Yeah.
are so incredibly important. And I say that with our jobs and our careers and everything that we do. There are some things we are give us energy or take energy away. The theme of the day. When you find the things that give you energy, lean into them hard.
Absolutely. Well, as we're getting close to the end of the conversation for now, at least, there are many, many lessons. And I, especially in a triple decker sandwiched generation person, what is maybe one or two lessons that you would like to leave the audience with when thinking about being in the middle of it all, right? And I think about right now, a lot of folks in the world think about sandwich generation as I have aging parents and I have kids. And that absolutely is a huge chunk of the population. And sandwich looks very different for different people, right? You're also a grandmother. You also have provided some level of care for a sibling, for a mom, right? Like the layers just look very different. So, any lessons or any words of wisdom you'd like to leave with our audience?
I would say for me, I said I'm incredibly blessed. And I truly, to my core, I'm blessed. And how we decide to show up is how our days lead us. Not all days feel blessed, right? But when you wake up in the morning and you choose to live that life that way, you will have a better day and a better interaction. We all have bad days. I'm not going to sit here and tell you that you can't take the suck out of the suck, right? You can't. But how you choose to walk through it is incredibly important. And the people around you see that. You can be positive in the negative.
Yeah.
Remembering that it's okay to have a bad day, but that doesn't create you to be the victim. It allows you to springboard off that and show other people what that grace looks like.
I love that. And it's beautifully stated. I had a similar conversation with someone recently, and they talked about kind of the steps they took to do exactly that. Is there some mantra, some action, a journal entry? Is there something that for you helps you ground yourself in maybe the days where you're like, this is a day that's going to be terrible, but you're trying to kind of reframe it and approach it in a different way?
I am a person that when I wake up, I remind myself what I have to be grateful for.
Mm.
If you can journal every day, one thing that you could be grateful for in that day, what would it be? In the worst of days, your best friend called you and that made your day, and you were
Yeah.
grateful for that, right? In the worst of days, your dog came and climbed up in your lap and you were grateful for that.
Yeah.
There are little things in the world that we have to be grateful for, and we need to remember those because we do live in America where we have some pretty great lives, and we forget to be grateful for all of the little things because the big things take our joy. So, where do you find your joy?
Yeah. Thank you. And with that, I would like to end on Carmen, I'm so grateful that you've said yes many times when you could have said no. I'm grateful in kind of the way you leaned into our conversation today. I'm really grateful that I honestly get to do this and have these conversations, and part of, for me personally, what led to the launch of the Sandwich podcast was having conversations as we're building Tumbleweed. And really what kind of came through was a lot of folks in this space feel very alone, especially when they're caring for an aging person or trying to navigate it all. It feels often very lonely. And the goal here for me is, how can we tell people you're not alone? Like you are not alone. There is a whole slew of us in the world who are living this, and it might look a little bit different. And so I want to create a space for people to feel connected and to remember that, we are better together. That's what I believe.
For sure. For sure. Couldn't say it better.
Well, Carmen, thank you again. This has been another episode of Sandwiched, and we look forward to our next episode next Friday. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Sandwiched is a Second Act Studio production with support from Tumbleweed. We couldn't do this without the support of our production team, Maddie Willis, Brennan Plank, and our interns, Eileen O'Doherty and Anthony Cano. Thanks for listening, and remember, you are not alone. Have a great one.